All right, with that, looks like we have reached a critical mass here and can go ahead and get started on the webinar today. So thank you so much for joining. We'll go through some quick housekeeping material first, but really looking forward to the webinar this morning and the regulatory experts we have joining us to talk through the regulatory changes for 2023. Before we get started and launch into the agenda today, some of you may be familiar with GoToWebinar. Feel free, definitely want this to be an interactive time together, so feel free to leverage the question box in your GoToWebinar box. It should be on the right-hand side of your screen. If that's collapsed, you can expand it out, but absolutely type in any and all questions as you think through them, as we talk through the different material. We do have a Q&A time at the end and can stay as long as you need, right? Also want to relieve some of the pressure. Don't feel like you have to take all the notes and screenshots along the way. Feel free to do that if you want, but we will be following up with an email and a recording of the webinar as well that you can certainly pass internally to your teams or anybody who doesn't make it this morning. And as well, if you have additional questions, feel free to email us at marketing@sourceintel.com or reach out to us on LinkedIn. Happy to interact on that front as well. But with that said, we can dive right in here to the agenda. So really looking forward to a great conversation. We have a couple regulatory experts on the team here joining us to talk through the items here. So we'll kick it off with brief panel introductions here shortly, and then dive right into the substance of the conversation here around EU ROHS exemptions and revisions, updates related to EU REACH, PFAS updates, everybody's favorite topic du jour these days. Quick stop on the France labeling decree, and then talk through a little bit how Source Intelligence can help navigate a lot of these changes and just the overall landscape for your teams. And I'll wrap it up with any final thoughts and facilitate hopefully a lively Q&A at the tail end here. So really looking forward to that. But before we dive into the panelist introductions, actually we'll dive in right now. So want to introduce really the star of the shows here real quick before we get started, Marth Covell and Nikki Johnson. My name is Michael Reiswick. I'm just a facilitator here, so I help head up our enterprise accounts here at Source Intelligence and look forward to interacting with you if you have any questions after the fact or want to set up specific times to talk through some of the questions maybe that are specific to your organization. Would love to have those conversations with you. But first and foremost, here momentarily, I'll be passing the baton over to Marth Covell. She is the environmental engineering supervisor here at Source Intelligence and has been working in the environmental compliance industry for well over 6 years now. During her tenure at Source, she has supported numerous clients in reaching their environmental compliance goals by providing technical expertise and guidance across really a gamut of regulations. Marth has her bachelor's and master's degree in biology from the University of West Florida. So thank you, Marth, for joining us and really looking forward to your insight here. And then Nikki Johnson as well is our VP of Environmental Engineering at Source and has been working in the environmental compliance industry for over 16 years. She sits on several IPC committees involved in the development of numerous standards, and her passion for chemistry and the environment led her to pursue a career in regulatory and product compliance. Nikki has her bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and master's degree in environmental engineering from Oklahoma State University, my home state. Go Pokes, but I'm not partial. So thank you, Nikki, for joining the conversation today, and really excited for the insight you can provide here. Before I pass the baton, I would be remiss if I didn't have a shameless plug for our next webinar here coming up around extended producer responsibility. So if you have your cell phone with you, feel free to scan the QR code there on the bottom right hand of your screen to go ahead and sign up for that upcoming webinar on EPR in North America. A lot of exciting stuff, certainly generating a lot of questions across the industry, and our team is really excited to kind of dive deeper in this with you and talk through the number of items related to just the ever-evolving landscape here. So really excited for that. Don't hesitate, go ahead and sign up. that webinar will be hosted March 9th at 11 a.m. Eastern as well. And then last but not least, while you're at it, if you haven't made your way to our website, sourceintelligence.com, there's great material, some of the material we're covering today, as well as previous webinars, regulatory blogs, white papers, our quarterly newsletter, you can sign up for that, and our forthcoming Source Academy, all hosted and accessible in the Resource Center tab on our website. So feel free to stop along there, check that out. If you have additional questions emerging from this, and you don't want to talk to anybody here, that's fine. Go to our website. There's a lot of information there that you can consume as well. So with that, I want to pass it off because I'm sure you've all come to hear the details around some of these changes. So I want to go ahead and pass the baton over to Marth. Marth, the show is yours.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for the introduction, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm very happy to be here today to discuss some upcoming regulatory changes that we can expect to see or may have already seen in 2023. I'm going to be beginning my presentation today by discussing some updates regarding the EU ROHS directive, and I'm going to start by specifically focusing on some changes we're going to see regarding ROHS exemptions. So, as you may know, certain applications are exempt from ROHS restriction if it is technically or scientifically impractical to prohibit the use of a specific hazardous substance. Therefore, exemptions were created to cover these sorts of scenarios. The exemptions are limited in time, and they're assigned a very specific expiration date. Once an exemption is put into place, it is regularly assessed by the EU Commission to consider various factors. That includes the availability of substitutes and the potential impacts that those substitutes may have, as well as any adverse effects these exemptions may have on innovation. The EU Commission works closely with the OCO Institute, which is a nonprofit organization contracted by the EU to evaluate the relevance of ROHS as well as the ROHS exemptions. Exemptions themselves can be renewed, and decisions regarding exemption renewals can take up to 2 years from the date of the renewal application. During the renewal review process, existing exemptions remain valid until a final decision is made by the EU Commission. In regards to 2023, most of the upcoming exemptions that are due to expire apply to Category 8 in vitro products, and this includes both Annex 3 and Annex 4 applications. The first exemptions that are due to expire are set for February 24th, and there are several Annex 3 exemptions to review. For example, one of them is Exemption 4A, which covers mercury in specific types of lamps. Furthermore, later in the year, we have quite a few additional exemptions that are set to expire as well in both Annex 3 and Annex 4 Category 8. And these are associated with a wide range of applications and will expire on January 21st of this year. A little bit more about ROHS exemptions. So as I mentioned in the last slide, ROHS exemptions can be renewed, and the exemptions continue to remain valid until that renewal decision is finalized by the EU Commission. The exemptions that are currently being reviewed for renewal are applicable to both Annex 3 and Annex 4 applications. Some of the exemptions that are currently being reviewed for renewal may be renewed as they are currently worded, or they may be replaced with a similar exemption that has a more narrow scope. So an example of this is Exemption 6A and 6A1. This exemption will likely be replaced by 6A2. The new exemption, 6A2, would further reduce the maximum lead concentration that's covered by the exemption. Currently, the exemption covers up to 0.35% lead in a homogeneous material, and the revised exemption would cover only up to 0.2% lead. Additionally, Exemption 6A2 would only apply to batch hot dip galvanized steel material. This year, many commonly utilized Annex 3 exemptions are also under review for renewal. This includes 6A, like I mentioned, but also 6B and 6C, which cover lead and certain types of metal alloys. It also includes Exemption 7A, which covers lead and solder. And then lastly, Exemptions 7C1 and 7C2 are being reviewed for renewal, and these cover lead in ceramic or glass materials. Historically, the EU Commission has followed the recommendation of the OCO Institute when it comes to ROHS exemptions. Therefore, there is a very high likelihood of the exemptions currently being reviewed as either being renewed or replaced as recommended by the OCO Institute. So to wrap up this brief section regarding ROHS, I'll talk about the ROHS directive itself. So the highly anticipated ROHS revision proposal was expected to be published Q1 of this year, 2023. However, it has been additionally delayed until possibly Q4 of 2023 and perhaps even beyond. The revision itself is expected to add additional restricted substance to the directive, as well as include changes in the phrasing and verbiage of the directive, which would assist with the reduction of cost and complexity. It is also possible that the ROHS directive may instead become a regulation. Regardless of the time frame, it is predicted that the revised ROHS directive or regulation would obviously not come into force for several years after the proposal is drafted, with some sources suggesting around 2027. The two substances that are currently being recommended by the OCO Institute to be added to the ROHS directive are tetrabromobisphenol A, which is a brominated flame retardant, also medium chain chlorinated paraffins, which are used as chlorinated flame retardants and also plasticizers commonly used in electronics. So next up, I'll go over some changes to EU REACH that we can expect to see this year. Firstly, we'll discuss the biannual SVHC candidate list updates. As you may know, the SVHC candidate list is updated twice yearly to add new substances which are included based on their hazardous properties. REACH Article 33 states that suppliers of articles containing an SVHC above the regulatory threshold must provide industrial and professional users the name of the substance. Furthermore, additional identifying information must be submitted to the ECHA SCIP database as applicable. Last month, on January 17th, the SVHC candidate list was updated with 9 additional substances or groups of substances, which brings the new SVH total to 233. We can expect to see the second annual update mid-year, likely in June or July. In regards to REACH and PFAS, so per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, which are abbreviated as PFAS, are a large class of substances that include thousands of chemicals, and these are often used for heat and stick resistance. The substances are highly resistant to degradation, and they are also easily transmitted within the environment. PFAS does accumulate in living organisms, and it can cause toxic effects, which include reproductive toxicity, endocrine disruption, and even potentially cancer. 2 of the most prevalent and well-studied PFAS substances, PFOS and PFOA, are currently restricted under the EU POPs regulation, and they are also listed on the SVHC candidate list. In February of 2023, so this month, PFAS is to become restricted under EU REACH Annex 17. The restriction will encompass the manufacture, the usage, and the market placement of these substances. So affected industry will need to request application-specific exemptions from this restriction if interested. In regards to REACH and lead, the European Chemicals Agency, abbreviated as ECHA, has proposed that lead be added to the REACH authorization list, also called Annex 14. If lead is added to Annex 14, authorization would have to be requested for the specific uses of lead. Companies that are interested in the continued usage of lead or any other substance that's found on that authorization list will have to present an application for authorization to the EU Commission. An ECHA member state committee meeting is scheduled for this month later in order to discuss which chemicals will be considered for authorization. It is expected that the affected industries will strongly lobby against the addition of the addition of lead to the authorization list. If IPC is one of the organizations that plans to attend this meeting in order to present the impacts that the addition of lead to the list would have on the electronics industry. So I'll go ahead and I'll wrap up this section regarding REACH by briefly discussing the REACH revision. A revision of the REACH regulation is to be undertaken to continue to reduce exposure to harmful substances, as well as to supplement the current regulatory system. Similar to ROHS, the REACH revision proposal has been repeatedly delayed, and it's now expected to also be released in Q4 of 2023. The revision is likely to include changes to the registration requirements, the addition of new assessment factors, simplification of the communication process within the supply chain, and also include reformation of the authorization and the restriction process. All right, so let's move on to a little bit regarding PFAS updates. So we've seen a lot of regulatory attention dedicated to changes in PFAS regulations over the past few years, and we can expect to see continued changes and updates both domestically and internationally in 2023 and beyond. The first thing we'll talk about is some changes to PFAS regulations in the United States. So at the federal level, the EPA has proposed that both PFOA and PFOS be designated as hazardous substances under CERCLA, which is also known as the Superfund Act. This would mean that entities would have to immediately report releases of PFOA and PFOS into the environment when it exceeds a specific reportable quantity. Furthermore, in regards to TSCA Section 8A7, it is expected that the EPA will release its final ruling regarding PFAS record keeping and reporting in Q1 of 2023. And this rule would include reporting requirements for over 1,000 different PFAS substances with no de minimis concentration. So this proposed rule would require the industry to report on the import and manufacture of PFAS, as well as any articles containing a PFAS substance since 2011 without exception. Considering the retroactive nature of this rule, it is highly controversial, and it is expected that many industry members will consider this overly burdensome and logistically infeasible. The commentary timeline to provide feedback for this proposed rule closed last year on December 27th. I'll talk about some state-specific regulations as well while we're here. So in regards to the state of California, they have banned PFAS in multiple types of products, including food wrappers, children's products, textiles, cosmetics, and also some firefighting foam. These bans went into effect on January 1st, and we can expect to see the ban of additional products containing PFAS in the future from California. And then let's talk briefly about Maine as well. So the state of Maine has implemented a new law which states that the Maine DEP must be notified of new products containing intentionally added PFAS beginning January 1st, 2023. Before this law went into effect, companies were able to file for a 6-month extension, and the Maine DEP website provides a list of companies that have been approved for this extension. To note, this extension was mostly granted to smaller companies. Additionally, as of January 1st of this year, PFAS has been banned in the state of Maine in the sale of specific items such as fabric treatments, carpets, and also rugs as well. In the future, Maine is to ban completely the sale of PFAS beginning January 2030. And overall, there are quite a few other states that have adopted PFAS regulations or are in the process of adopting PFAS regulations in regards to maximum permittable concentrations in drinking water. Great, so to wrap up this section of information regarding PFAS and my part of the presentation, I'll touch on just a few changes to international PFAS regulations. So firstly, perfluoroheptanoic acid and its salts was added to the SVHC candidate list in January, which I briefly discussed earlier, and now it must be declared when contained above the threshold, similar to any other current REACH substance. Additionally, the ECHA committee is reviewing the restriction of PFAS usage in firefighting foams, similar to California's recent review. Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden have submitted a proposal to ECHA for an EU-wide restriction on the production and usage of PFAS. And then lastly, in France, the French authorities have recently released an action plan specifically dedicated to PFAS regulation. So a lot of changes are coming, and it seems every day we're hearing a little bit more about PFAS in different countries and in different states. So with that being said, that concludes my portion of the presentation. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to pass the baton to Ms. Nikki Johnson. Today she'll be discussing the France labeling decree, as well as some ways that Source Intelligence can help you with your environmental compliance goals. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Mara, and thanks for taking us through those updates. We definitely have lots to watch out for over the coming year. Now I'd like to take a little time to talk about the new French labeling requirements. The reason we've chosen the French decree as a topic is basically because it can be viewed as a precursor to what's likely to come in the future with new legislation on sustainable products, extended producer responsibility, and critical raw minerals. France Decree 2022-748 was released in 2022 and went into effect on January 1st, 2023. The decree will require producers, importers, distributors, and others placing waste-generating products on the market to inform consumers about the environmental characteristics of those products. Many types of products will be impacted by the requirements, including packaging and packaging products, construction products and materials, electrical and electronic equipment, textile products, products such as furnishings, toys, leisure items, and many more. The French decree aims to support consumers in making sustainable choices, which could lead to reductions in waste. As I previously stated, the labeling requirements came into force on January 1st, 2023, but only for large companies who are placing over 22,000 units or over 500 million euros on the French market. The requirements will go into effect for companies placing more than 10,000 units and more than 200 million euros on January 1st, 2024, and on January 1st, 2025 for companies still placing over 10,000 units, but instead with just over 10 million euros on the French market. It's a law which also has teeth, as administration fines can go up to 15,000 euros, but also have the potential to be substantially more if misleading commercial practices are discovered under the Consumer Code. Companies which are in scope will be required to make new labeling information available by some type of electronic means or by displaying it and labeling it on the product itself. The labeling required for each product will vary depending on the type of product. Now let's talk a little bit about the type of information which will be required on the labeling. Some of the labeling requirements will include the repairability of electrical and electronic equipment, This would include the availability of information for repair, sustainability for repair, and the affordable access to spare parts. These same products will also have to report on the presence of precious and rare earth minerals, as well as many other of the labeling categories. The recycled material content will be required for many categories of products, as well as their recyclability. When we think of recyclability, we need to consider the things. Is it collectible? Is it sortable? Is it free of disruptors to the recycling process? And is the recycled material more than 50% of the waste collected? Can it be recycled on an industrial scale? And is there a market for it? All of these things will have to be considered when determining the recyclability of the product. For products like textiles, clothing, footwear, and household linens, traceability will be required on where each step of the manufacturing process was carried out. This would include the weaving, the dyeing, and the assembling of the final product. These same types of products will also have to report on the presence of plastic microfibers in their products. All products will have to report on the presence of hazardous substances contained within the product. Luckily, this hazardous substance assessment is aligned with the REACH substances of very high concern. As I stated in the beginning, many of these requirements are similar to other requirements we are seeing related to extended producer responsibility, the critical raw materials legislation, and other sustainability efforts. All the information being collected and reported is similar to what is being outlined as requirements for the EU digital product passports. I believe this is just one of many versions of this type of legislation that we can expect to see in the future. So today we've given you a lot of information about the changes we are expecting for 2023. All of these, in addition to the day-to-day struggles which already exist with obtaining data and managing a complex product compliance system. Now I would like to take a little time to talk about having a partner like Source Intelligence can make that process a little easier. First, I'll talk a little bit about the different types of products and services which Source Intelligence provides. We can offer our customers everything from turnkey managed services to standalone compliance software, which can be implemented and utilized by your own internal resources. Our managed services include programs like ROHS, REACH, SCIP dossier creation and submission, TSCA Section 6H PVT reporting, California Prop 65, and many more. With our managed services, Source Intelligence engages with your suppliers to request compliance documentation, reviews that documentation for quality assurance, and normalizes the data so that it can be reviewed at the product level. Our newest product offerings include our Compliance Map software solutions. The Compliance Map software can be configured to gather data on a multitude of regulations and can also be configured to meet your company's specific needs. It has built-in automation for the engagement of your suppliers and compliance templates for easy upload of the supplier documentation into the platform. We also offer obsolescence services, which include receiving product change notifications, material change notifications, and end-of-life notifications for components contained within your products. There is a built-in life cycle assessment, which estimates the lifespan of some common off-the-shelf components. And in the event of obsolescence, alternates can be identified which have a similar form, fit, and function. Lastly, we offer consulting services, both for our customers and as a standalone service. If you're receiving compliance requests from your customers which you don't understand, or you have questions on how existing and upcoming regulations might affect your products, we are here to help you answer those questions. There are many benefits to partnering with a company like Source Intelligence. I believe first and foremost is the access to subject matter experts. As we've been discussing today, many new product compliance requirements are emerging and long-standing requirements are being reviewed for revision. Tracking the regulatory changes and understanding their impact on your products can be a complex process. Partnering with Source Intelligence gives you access to experts who are tracking these changes and helps you prepare for any impact which may occur due to new substance restrictions or reporting requirements. The SI compliance tools allow you to easily analyze compliance issues at the product level. You can identify products which contain non-compliant components and whether or not you have alternate sources within your BOM already. You can quickly perform gap analysis and identify non-responsive suppliers. For SCIP, you can identify products which require dossiers and have those dossiers generated and submitted automatically through the S2S submission process. Product declarations for ROHS and REACH can be generated on demand to meet your customers' requests. In addition to just gathering compliance data through certificates of compliance and other evidence documentation, our tools give you the ability to request and track full material declarations from your suppliers. Obtaining a full material declaration allows you to better understand the chemicals which are used to manufacture your products and therefore react quickly when new substances are proposed for restriction or reporting. Lastly, as we all know, proving product compliance means gathering a lot of evidence documents. Every component in your product may have a number of compliance documents required to validate information for all of the requirements for which they are in scope. Ensuring that you have current documentation and having that documentation ready to generate technical files or other evidence for placing products on the market can be a daunting task. The Source Intelligence platforms allows you to house all of your supplier documents in one place and review the documents or download them easily on demand. In addition to having a partner like Source Intelligence, having a good understanding of the products you sell will help you prepare and react to the upcoming regulatory changes. First, you will need to ensure that your product BOMs are well defined. This would include making sure all suppliers are clearly listed in the BOM and that they are current and that the part numbers you purchase are being kept up to date. This would mean staying on top of all of your engineering changes and making sure that your BOMs reflect the components which are actually going into your product. In order to be fully compliant, you must ensure that every component which goes into your product meets all of the restriction requirements. Source Intelligence can help you keep track of any supplier acquisitions to ensure that you always get the data from the most current supplier, and will help you identify when you have bad part numbers listed within your BOMs so that you can have a clean list to obtain the data. You will also need to make sure that you are considering any consumables which remain on your product. We find that solders and adhesives are often missed when analyzing product compliance, and these types of products often contain hazardous substances. Source Intelligence can help you ensure that you are only introducing compliant consumables into your products. Obtaining compliance information for custom parts that you fabricate in-house can also be a complex process. In these cases, you don't have a supplier to provide you with the information you need. You must rely on the engineers who have selected the raw materials and created the engineering drawings to select compliant materials. SI can help you analyze your product drawings and fabricated parts to determine the compliance status and identify gaps in information which may prevent compliance documentation from being obtained. It is also important to build relationships with your suppliers. Collaboration with suppliers is critical for obtaining updated information when new requirements arise or when new substance restrictions are added. Source Intelligence has spent the last 2 decades building relationships with suppliers throughout the supply chain. We allow them to provide us the data in whatever method is easiest for them. We have worked to become a supplier partner, not a burden, and found that this collaboration helps our customers obtain data in a timely manner. Between the relationships SI has built with the suppliers and customers providing us supplier contacts familiar with their products, we have found that we have a much higher supplier response rate than other approaches which require suppliers to enter data into portals or deliver through rigid processes. Lastly, I think the most important topic to touch on is to start collecting your data early. The sooner you identify parts which may be affected by an upcoming regulatory change, the more time you will have to react. In addition to all the other benefits of partnering with Source Intelligence, we can help you prepare for an upcoming regulatory change which may affect your products. We will help you identify components which are at the greatest risk of containing newly regulated substances and allow you to be prepared for any potential impacts on your products. And with that, I will turn it back over to Michael for some final thoughts before we move on to our Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Mart. What an amazing overview there. Hopefully you've took a lot of notes. If not, no worries. One of the questions was, hey, will you guys send us the recording of this whole presentation? Absolutely. We'll just want to make sure that's packaged appropriately and sent out to you in the next day or so. So rest assured you will have recourse to these reference materials moving forward. But thank you so much, Nikki and Mark, for walking us through that. Listen, you're living this day in and day out on this webinar here. You don't need us to tell you. The past 20 years have just seen an explosion of overall policy interventions, and you know, moving forward, that's not looking to change, but only accelerate, right? So it provides an opportunity for many of us to collectively come together and figure out, hey, how do we stay in front of these changes and make sure that these changes in the regulatory landscape are properly accounted for and incorporated into our team's processes, right? So this is what we live and breathe every day. We really enjoy diving into the weeds with you and your team and the processes that facilitate and account for these requirements and changes. So feel free, shoot over the questions, reach out to us if we didn't cover anything that you thought we should have. Absolutely, we want to talk about this. Obviously, there's way more that could be included in here. I mean, we could spend all day on this webinar if we wanted to cover everything. So more than welcome to jump on individual calls with you to talk through some of these things. That said, we do have some active Q&A here coming in. So Nikki and Martha, I want to put you back on the spot here for those who are still hanging out with us on this webinar. A couple great questions. Starting off with potentially a softball question, but I thought was really good. So I want to start here. What is the difference between a directive and a regulation for maybe those that may not know the difference there?
I'll take this one on since I mentioned that earlier. So the difference between a regulation and a directive is that a regulation has binding legal force and it enters into force on a specific date for all the member states in the EU. In opposition to that, or in different from that, is a directive. And directives are legislative acts that set goals for each member state, but these directives leave the process of transposition into law at the discretion of each individual country. So that's the main difference between those two.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Another question here. I'm sifting through this. What tracking and support do you offer for UK reach?
Oh, so I can take that one. So right now, we do have UK reach offerings within our compliance map solution. Within our managed services, we are gathering that data as well and working to build it into sort of the UI of that. But we are actively tracking the UK ROHS and reach. We have a location there in the UK, and so we do have offerings for that.
Perfect. And obviously, if you're wanting to learn more details on that, feel free to reach out to us on an individual basis, and we can absolutely set up a follow-up conversation to dive deeper there. Second question here, or actually an additional question, where is the information regarding ROHS exemption validity and renewal status found? So where is that found?
Well, the European Commission actually makes this information publicly available on their website, and the document that they publish and frequently update is called the Exemptions Rolling Plan and Validity. It's an Excel file that you can access, and it will contain information regarding all former and current exemptions, the applicability of those exemptions, expiration dates, whether or not they're being considered for renewal, et cetera, et cetera. So if needed, we can provide a link to that website, but yeah, it's on the EU Commission website.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Does the EU Commission generally adopt the recommendations made by the OCO Institute? Martha, maybe this is for you again.
Yeah, historically they have, with very little to no change to the recommendations. So we could expect to see that those findings by the OCO Institute are taken in and made official by EU Commission.
Perfect. Excellent. Coming through here, looking through this. Here's a good one. How can I prepare for the upcoming ROHS revision?
Oh, I'll answer that one too. So start collecting data right away. Once the revision proposal is actually published, we may want to wait until it's official. But what we've done in the past, especially when the amended ROHS directive came into play, is we preemptively started collecting information from suppliers so that when it entered into force, we already had that information on file and we didn't lose any ROHS information. So yeah, start early, and also you can have that same mindset regarding exemptions that are due to expire as well. If you recognize that you have products in your BOMs that potentially have expiring exemptions, you'll want to preemptively reach out to your suppliers to see whether or not they qualify for a replacement exemption, or if they have any intentions to remove that specific restricted substance for future compliance purposes.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, let me. These are great questions coming in here. Give me a second. All right, this one, Nikki, for you on French labeling decree. Is the French labeling decree a requirement for products sold in France, or only if we want to include sustainability claims on the product?
So it's going to be based on placing products on the market, within the French market. So it would be based on if you meet the number of units and the euro amount. So it wouldn't matter what your sustainability goals were. If you place more than 10,000 units on the market and at least 10,000 euros, you will have to report.
Perfect. I want to ask this question, and it's more, I don't know if there's a definitive answer here, but food for thought, if you will, right? Maybe an opportunity to follow up down the road. But somebody asked, what is the time scale for getting information to our customers once the update has happened? Obviously, that could be in reference to a number of different things, but one customer has demanded a response within 20 days. Is that correct? So I don't know if either of you have any thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. It would really depend on what type of information that it is. Most of the regulations sort of have that built in. So let's say it's REACH. If as soon as a new candidate list is added to the REACH SVHC list, once that's done and somebody requests that data from you, you have 45 days to provide them that data. So that is built in to the regulation. So in most cases, you would be expected to have the information at the time that the requirement is enacted. So let's say an exemption expires and your product was using that exemption as of the date that that exemption expires, you would be expected to provide your customers updated information at that time, because the understanding there would be that you've known that it was coming. So really, again, it's going to depend on particularly which requirement that it is. And if you have any specific questions, as Michael said, you can reach out to us about that.
Perfect. Another question related to sort of, I would put that in the same category here in terms of process and sort of what do I do if somebody asked, what is the responsibility of a distributor if a manufacturer is unwilling to or unable to provide specific certifications on a product or to completely fill out the documents? And again, there's probably a lot of nuance around that, but just general thoughts on that.
That's going to depend again on you know, where are you distributing your products, where are you placing them on the market, and what are the obligations within that market for distributors. For most of the regulations and product compliance things that we talk about, if you are the distributor are the one placing the product on the market, then it is your responsibility to get that data from your manufacturer. So to me, I would consider it if you want me to distribute and sell your parts, you have to be willing to provide me the data that I need to legally place them on the market. Because in most all of the requirements, you'll see distributors have the same requirements as anyone else, other than things like conflict minerals, of course. But if you're placing a product on a market that has substance restrictions, you must know that it complies with those restrictions.
Gotcha. Also, any specific advice for suppliers rather than seller of the products? I like this question because it's sort of open-ended like that. Any advice for suppliers rather than the seller of products, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an open-ended question there, and being someone who, you know, deals with suppliers on a day-to-day basis, I think we would have lots of advice for suppliers, you know, in terms of make your data readily available, make it easily available. You know, the easier you can make it to communicate your data to customers, the easier it's going to be, the faster you can get updates out. So as a supplier, you really need to be prepared for these changes, almost more than somebody using the product, because the people buying your components and your products are going to need to know whether or not they're compliant. Otherwise, they can't move forward using your products in their products. So it's really critical for suppliers, if you want to stay competitive within the industry, to realize that you're going to have to provide this data. We see it on a day-to-day basis where our customers are having problems getting data from their suppliers, and their suppliers just won't give it to them. So they go looking for a new supplier of that part, because they have no choice but to know that it's compliant and to have the proper documentation. So if you as a supplier are not willing and able to provide the data, you're going to lose those customers who are going to go and find a supplier who can.
Love that. Also, my 2 cents, and literally take it with a grain of salt. Operate with the general principle of how can we be as proactive as possible instead of it being in a reactive position, because that is a losing proposition, especially as just number of requests continue to proliferate. So there's a lot of different ways you could take this. Martha, I think this next one is for you, so get ready. This question is regarding the Maine. Any insight into how to interpret the Maine 6-month extension regarding the PFAS extension there on the reporting rule? When do the 6 months start counting from?
So based on my understanding, companies that wanted an extension on providing the information to the Maine DEP had to file for the extension before the law came into effect on January 1st. Thus, the extension is 6 months from the day the law goes into effect, so 6 months from January 1st. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that any additional extension requests will be accepted since the law has already been enacted. So hopefully that provides you a little bit of insight. They have 6 additional months to provide the required information. And this extension was helped, the Maine Chamber of Commerce helped all the applicable suppliers get this sorted out. So.
Okay. Along the same lines, so Martha, probably sticking with you, and I don't know if there's a right answer to this, but more or less just your opinion. Our question regarding, where did it go here? They're just flying in so fast here, so it's moving around on me. Okay, given the expected industry backlash on the retroactive design of the EPA PFAS reporting, would this delay the rule coming into force at all, from your perspective?
That's a great question. So the EPA hasn't announced that they're delaying the rule as of now, and it's expected to come out very soon. It's possible that they may change the verbiage of the law or make some exceptions possible or exemptions possible, but we really won't have any more information regarding that until the EPA releases additional news as to the proposed rule, whether they've made any changes or whether they might go back a little bit more to the drawing board in order to satisfy people that this rule will affect.
Gotcha.
And just to add to that, as Martha was saying earlier, you know, industry, this is another one that industry is working really hard to lobby against. So industry like IPC organizations are gathering statements from their member companies to really lobby to the EPA and make them understand what a burden it would be. So the hope is that they would listen to industry, but you just never know what kind of decision they will make. But the industry still is, you know, as we speak, very actively lobbying against this and trying to at least make them understand what they're asking for, making people report on something back over the last 10 years that wasn't being tracked over those 10 years, and really what a burden that would be. So we're really hoping that they'll listen to that.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I want to squeeze in two more here. I know we're getting tight on time. Nikki, I think this is for you. Our supplier is asking us, the purchaser, to pay for REACH testing. Is that correct? Or should they provide information to us freely?
Yeah, and we see that a lot, unfortunately, where suppliers want to expect their customers to pay for the data that, you know, really they should be providing. So that's really going to depend on where your supplier is located. So particularly if you are sourcing things in the US or sourcing things somewhere where that company is not in scope of REACH, then they really have no legal obligation to provide you that data. You know, as I said before, really to stay as a proactive supplier within the industry, you need to provide the data. But, you know, a US-based company would not have an obligation. And if they were asking you to pay, then, you know, that would be legally within their right to do so. I don't think good business practice, but legally in their right to do so. However, if the company is based within the EU where REACH is required, then no, they can't charge you for it, because Article 33 of REACH states that they must at a minimum tell all consumers what SPHCs are contained in the product, and then above that they must have those products registered in the SCIP database. Which is publicly available for anyone to see the SPHCs contained within the product. So for EU-based suppliers, then no, they are legally obligated to give you that data. All other suppliers, yeah, they unfortunately can't charge you.
Thank you for that clarity there. Last one, and there's plenty of other questions here. We're trying to get out the what we would think would be the most relevant for the broad audience here. I like this one because it allows us to speak a little bit to, at the end of the day, we're all just trying to facilitate this in the most efficient way possible, right? And so I'd like one of you to speak to this, and maybe from what we see, and Martha, maybe from your perspective, given this is what your team does literally every day for our customers. The question is this: so we have much of the data on our website, and the call centers continue to bombard us with requests even after we've answered them. It's out of control. The requesting companies don't want to go to our website. They want to have us fill out their unique spreadsheets and do the work for them. In fairness, it's a two-way street. Both sides should do better. So, Martha, would love for you to just speak for that. Maybe that could wrap us up. But what do you see from your end? Because again, this is the world your team lives in day day out. And from SI's perspective, how do we avoid that sort of tension altogether and ultimately get the information without putting an undue burden on those suppliers?
Right. So one of the things we really strive for at Source Intelligence is to have good relationships with our suppliers. And we try to reduce what we refer to as supplier fatigue. So requesting data unnecessarily, requesting information that's already publicly available, or even requesting information that we might already have in our database. So with that being said, our process is to do our work, do the work we're paid for, and go in and we obtain the data as it's available before we reach out to engage the suppliers. So our team receives the list of products for which research is needed. We go into our database and we standardize your part numbers, we standardize your suppliers so that we can match up your BOM with data we already have on file. We also make an effort to go out and scrub websites, find correct and current points of contact before we even engage our suppliers at all. So one of our biggest points of pride is our good relationship with our suppliers, our attention to detail, and trying to prevent that supplier fatigue so that we maintain those good relationships and can be as efficient as possible. So we have a series of procedures in place that help us avoid unnecessary outreach to suppliers, thus improving our relationship and improving the turnaround between the time you provide us your list of products and the time that you get the information you need.
Love that. Nikki,
Yeah.
last word on this. Take us home.
Yeah, just to sort of add on to that, when you talk about an industry as a whole and how we all need to do better, and I would agree with that, 100%. And I think that that's a lot of what the EU digital passport is moving towards, and really one of the things that organizations like IPC and other organizations have been working on for years, and making this data digital in a format that can be, passed from company to company and not require anyone to scrub a website and not require any spreadsheets, but instead to have the data sort of travel with the part, and to where, when somebody sends you a request, you can just respond to it digitally in a industry approved format that can be read right into whomever system that it is. And so I think as we as an industry grow in these types of requirements, that those are the types of systems and things that we're going to have to move towards, so that this data can sort of digitally follow with the product and can be passed from company to company and person to person without somebody having to go get it on the website, and without you having to tell someone 100 times, it's there on my website. They can just plug in, request it, and have your system send it, and hopefully that's where we can sort of get in the future, so that it takes the burden off everyone.
Love that perspective, Nikki. Certainly, it sounds like an opportunity for another webinar down the road to unpack that further, because we all know if the 99th email and call didn't get you the answer, I'm sure the 100th would, right? I think we're all in agreement there. No, in all seriousness, I think that wraps up our time together. Thank you so much, Nikki and Marth. Really appreciate your insight here. We're an open book. Reach out to us, scan the QR code for post-webinar follow-up. We can answer any specific questions you have if we didn't get to yours. All the tough ones, don't hold back. If we don't know the answer, which we don't know everything, we certainly will try our best to get it back to you and do our research. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, and really looking forward for you guys signing up for the EPR webinar on March 9th. Stop by our resources tab on our website. There's a lot of information there as well. Thank you so much, all.